It's already hard to employ maids and servants in this era, but sometimes it's hard even if you're in a fantasy world. Especially if your mansion is in a forest known for being filled to the brim with undead. This is the case for our protagonist, Kurazaku Rintaro. One day he finds a little girl in the same forest. She's willing to work as a maid in his mansion for minimum wage. So, what's the catch, you ask? The little girl is also a necromancer. Let's find out what extraordinary things the genius alchemist and necromancer Maid have done working together. The two men apologize to a little girl for the inconvenience. They claim they only wanted to ask her for directions. In fear, the men run away. The girl tells her guardian Lance that these two men shouldn't be so scared. Meanwhile, Rintaro buys some rock salt and chloride from Clarice, a local vendor. Before he leaves, she gives him a message from the Alchemist Association's leader, that Rintaro should show up once in a while. He brushes the message off before Clarice asks him to get a housekeeper. Rintaro believes that no housekeeper would want to work in his mansion. After he leaves, another attendant is curious about the man's name. Clarice explains that it's Kurazaku Rintaro, a genius alchemist considered second closest to the Philosopher's Stone. He lives alone in the forest of corpses in a massive mansion. As Rintaro heads back, he finds a pack of undead wolves around a child. Rintaro feels bad for the kid and shoos away the wolves, to offer a prayer. To his surprise, the girl wakes up, alive and in one piece. She's also super hungry. So Rintaro takes her back to the mansion. Rintaro brings her some leftovers of a meat and potato stew. The girl finds it absolutely delicious. She compliments Rintaro and asks him if he's a chef. He states that he's an alchemist and that cooking and alchemy are more or less the same, since they both involve processing and synthesizing materials to make something. She then tries to ask him for a favor, which Rintaro misunderstands, and starts explaining the recipe. She stops him midway and asks him to let her work for him. Turns out, she was let go from the mansion she previously worked at. So she has no place to go now. The girl agrees to work on low pay as long as she has food and a place to sleep. Rintaro considers the proposal, before asking her how she survived the forest of corpses in the first place. The forest is infested with undead. Alchemists like him use a special medicine to discourage the undead. Rintaro doesn't believe that a little girl like her could defend herself in the forest. The girl lowers her head before saying that she'll show him her true power. She then shouts Lance, causing a massive and armed skeleton soldier to materialize. Rintaro is shocked at the sight, having realized that she's a necromancer. He tries to run, but Lance blocks his escape route in an instant. The girl tells him that he can't escape from Lance. Rintaro says that his house has no monetary value. She then simply asks him to lend her cleaning supplies. The girl is a wandering maid named Chloe, and the skeleton knight Lance is her partner. Her specialty is cleaning everything in the house. With cleaning supplies in hand, Chloe starts dusting the mansion with Lance's help. From the windows to the roof, Chloe soon cleans up the entirety of the room, making it sparkle. Rintaro looks at Chloe a bit suspiciously. He's wondering why she chooses to be a maid when she seems to be a high-ranking necromancer. She can even summon a skeleton knight, why would she want to do the cleaning? Chloe tells him that the ability to summon spirits and move dead bodies is useless in this world. This power is despised, so she can't earn a living to feed herself with it. Rintaro thinks for a bit before saying that he understands her situation. He then describes the mansion as a needlessly large house that used to be a rich man's vacation home. But after the undead appeared here, the mansion became uninhabitable. He's had trouble finding a helping hand due to that issue. However, Rintaro doesn't intend to trust the necromancer girl on the very first day. He says he'll give her a trial period of a week, during which she'll have to prove her skills as a maid. Chloe lawfully agrees, and the two formally introduce themselves. Chloe is excited at having found such a nice person, but she believes he's probably a weirdo. The girl brought her master tea, to which he said he heard everything she said. Chloe tries to explain that she didn't mean that, but Rintaro brushes it off. The girl then happily states that her master doesn't seem to have any friends. She's the same way though, since Lance is more of a guardian to her. At Rintaro's question of whether he's a slave, Chloe tells him that Lance has been by her side as her guardian ever since she became self-aware. Rintaro tells Chloe that he feels a bit uncomfortable with a skeleton walking behind his maid. Chloe responds that he can do manual labor around the house. Rintaro proposes that he spend some time chopping lumber. Lance was overcome with incredible energy, so Rintaro decided that it was probably not a worthy job for a skeleton knight. Chloe reassured the master by saying that Lance was just happy, since chopping lumber was something he was good at. Rintaro still doesn't get how she can understand Lance, when he doesn't even speak though. With Lance chopping wood, Rintaro suggests that it's about time for dinner preparations. He initially suggests cooking himself, but when he sees Chloe shuffling away, he tells her that she should show him her cooking skills. She's flustered, and tells him that she can't cook because of her ability. She can hear the voices of the dead when she tries to prepare meat. That's why she can't concentrate on cooking. The girl thinks she's failed at her duties, but Rintaro tells her that he planned to keep cooking anyway. Chloe vows to work even harder to make up for her lack of cooking skills. She heads off to work, and hopes Rintaro will cook her a tasty dinner. While Rintaro cooking, he does feel that he's being swept up by her pace. He ignores the thought and prepares a delicious deep-fried pork cutlet for dinner. While they're eating, Rintaro asks if Lance needs to eat. Chloe explains that she provides him with the mana he needs, so her eating provides energy for him as well. Rintaro realizes this little girl needs to eat more food, and offers her another meal. On that cute note, the first day of their meeting came to an end. Chloe dreams of two maids berating her for being a child of corpses, and telling her to leave. She wakes up and says good morning to Lance. She telling him not to worry about her dream. After a while, Chloe went downstairs. Rintaro has already managed to make natto and miso soup. After breakfast, Chloe gets ready to begin cleaning, while Rintaro intends to head out to town. He also tells her that she doesn't need to clean the basement since it's a place for his alchemy research. Chloe understands and sees him off. Rintaro heads off to the local alchemy ingredient shop. He is a bit disappointed to find Clarice there. Clarice notices that he's obviously unhappy, but Rintaro responds that it's because she sometimes messes up the mixture he needs. It seems the two have the same teacher. After buying a bunch of ingredients, Clarice also gives Rintaro some kanpei too. It's a sugar candy he taught her how to make. Meanwhile, Chloe finishes cleaning up the entire mansion. With everything cleaned up, she can't help but be curious about the research room in the basement. She considers going in for a bit before finally succumbing to the urge to go clean the forbidden room. She tries to open the door but it's locked. Lance suggests that the door would probably open up from the inside. He disappears and resummons on the other side of the door, letting Chloe inside. The girl heads inside with her hand on her nose from the awful smell. The room seems to be filled with barrels and jars. Rintaro suddenly appears behind her, and Chloe knows she's in trouble now. She begins profusely apologizing before Rintaro tells her that he makes the fermented food here. He didn't want unwanted bacteria to enter the room. That's why he stopped her from going in. She then says that she thought he would probably be doing forbidden research, like bringing the dead back to life. He tries to point the remark to her, the necromancer, when she says that necromancy just involves manipulating the dead and can't truly bring the dead back to life. Rintaro says that the same is true for alchemy. It's not possible to return things to their original state once they've been transmuted. The two walk down the hall and Rintaro offers Chloe a piece of pickled plums, calling them really sweet. The gullible Chloe opens her mouth, and Rintaro plops the sour pickled plum in her mouth. He calling it punishment for entering the basement. Rintaro smiled seeing her cute angry face. Chloe sees the master smile for the first time, and tells him so. Rintaro then offers her a sugar candy, if she stops teasing him. The girl doesn't believe him, assuming he's just fooling her. Later at night, Chloe tastes the candy, which turns out to be really sweet. She tells Lance that their master Rintaro is different from the other adults. She remarks that maybe she'll have a pleasant dream tonight. In the Forest of Corpses, the men who ran away back when they met Chloe talk about how they failed to get the fang of an undead wolf pup. The men soon see Rintaro's mansion in the distance. They recognize it as the house of an alchemist from a foreign country, who lives alone. They decide to rob the place to get something valuable. One of the men thinks it's a bad idea, but follows his big bro anyway. The two are sneaking around, when they see Lance chopping lumber. They suddenly realize that they've seen the skeleton somewhere, when Chloe and Rintaro approach Lance. After seeing Chloe dressed up in high-end maid clothes, they decide that her employer must be rich. The two thinks about kidnapping Chloe for ransom, but Lance suddenly starts walking in their direction. Thankfully for the two would-be thieves, he just throws a bucket of rotting meat in their direction. Lance was following orders from Chloe, who wanted to feed the undead wolves their favorite meat. The undead wolves immediately pounced on the two men. So, they had to run towards the mansion. Lance chases off wolves, while Chloe checks up on the two men. Chloe recognizes these two men. Rintaro yells for her to get away, but it's too late. One of the men had already taken out a gun. He covers Chloe's mouth and holds her hostage before demanding ransom. The man whispers in Chloe's ear that she should stay still, his gun isn't even loaded. Rintaro is taking out money from his wallet, but Chloe tells him to hurry because their lives are in danger. Before she can finish speaking, Lance appears ominously behind the kidnappers' backs. Lance grabs hold of the man's wrist, making the one gun fall out of his hand before lifting up another man by the collar. Chloe tells him not to kill them. She believes that even the weakest of creatures deserve mercy. The girl tells Rintaro that when Lance gets angry, he doesn't even listen to her, so she wants him to be careful of that as well. After the two idiots are tied up, the big bro tells Chloe and Rintaro that if they want to kill them, then they should be quick about it. Rintaro and Chloe discuss their views, with one wanting specimens for human experiments while the other suggests using the leftovers to feed the undead dogs. The big bro instantly takes his words back and begs the two to save them. Rintaro asks Lance to cut the ropes, they are not ruthless enough to kill idiots. Chloe threatens the two a bit, after which Rintaro tells them to scram. They comply wholeheartedly, and run off into the forest. Rintaro tells Chloe that she did a good job, so he will be scoring her well for today's work. But Chloe is still thinking of how Man had told her that the gun wasn't loaded. She wonders whether the two will be alright, since it's gotten dark and the fog is building up. At this time, some stronger monsters tend to come out. Rintaro asks her why she's worried about them since they held her at gunpoint. Chloe replies that she still doesn't think they were bad people. She says that before running off into the forest. Rintaro thinks of how he's been constantly swept up by her pace ever since she showed up. He can't tell whether she's nosy, or just soft-hearted. In the forest of corpses, a few undead wolves come up to Chloe before she hears screams. She follows the noise and finds the two men on their butts, scared of something. Lance suddenly comes in front of Chloe to guard her. The ghost of a woman floats in front of them. Chloe tells the two men to quickly get out. They comply as Lance slashes the ghost to no effect. Chloe tells Lance to step back before the ghost sucks his mana dry. The ghost is about to reach for Lance and Chloe, when Rintaro comes to the rescue. He douses the ghost with a freezing solution, making her disappear. He explains that ghosts are really just bits of slime, attached together through condensed water vapor. The fastest way to get rid of them is by using a freezing solution. He suggests that Chloe come back. He still has to make dinner. Before the gang can head back, Chloe falls to her knees after getting drained of mana. Rintaro lifts her into his arms to carry her home. Chloe says that it's unfair. If he does these kinds of things, any girl would fall for him. Rintaro seems not to have heard what she said. So the girl brushes it off by asking him what's for dinner. The next day, Chloe welcomes Clarice as she shows up at the mansion for a visit. She tells her that Rintaro is currently doing some research and asks her for her name and the purpose of her visit. Clarice stands there a bit shocked, and instead asks Chloe who she is. The girl replies that she's the maid of this mansion when Rintaro shows up behind the two. He tells Chloe that she doesn't have to entertain guests, before realizing that Clarice is at the door. She asks him who this girl is. She then making a big deal about him keeping a little girl in a place like this. After the situation calms down a bit, Rintaro introduces Clarice as his alchemy master's granddaughter. Clarice clarifies that she's also a disciple of the Elmith Canary. She then proceeds to warn Chloe about the forest of corpses and the undead monsters everywhere. Rintaro is about to tell Clarice that she doesn't have to worry, but Chloe signals him not to mention it. Rintaro covers his prior comment up by saying that she's the daughter of his acquaintance, and wanted to undergo maid training. He then asks Clarice why she's here. Clarice had made the mistake of giving him baking soda instead, so she was here to deliver the right ingredient. After a brief talk about konjac jelly, Clarice has enough of the two and heads back. After she leaves, Rintaro asks Chloe why she didn't want to reveal that she's a necromancer. Chloe says that unlike him, Clarice seemed like a decent person and that it would probably be bad if she found out. Meanwhile, Clarice heads back to the shop where her mother greets her. Her mother asks about Rintaro, to which Clarice responds that he's the same as usual, but he also has a girl staying in his home now. The mother seems to think that it's a big step for Rintaro, since he hasn't shown an interest in people ever since his master passed away. Clarice thinks about this. She doesn't have a good feeling about Rintaro suddenly hiring a maid, and being so vague about everything. She suddenly heads back out of the store. In the mansion, Rintaro is finally done preparing the konjac jelly, so he gives some to Chloe. He jokes that he made it by rehydrating a dried slime, but Chloe believes him like a child. Rintaro goes on a long info dump about the jelly. Chloe prefers not to listen to him, and focus on eating. The girl then asks about the konjac plant being grown in the garden. Rintaro says he's not a farmer, so he can't grow much. Meanwhile, Clarice reaches the mansion but quickly hides when she hears Chloe talking. She observes as Chloe walks around with Lance, and watches them unload a bucket of rotting meat. Clarice has a bad feeling after smelling the blood, when suddenly an arm pops out of the ground. Undead humans start springing out of the earth, making Clarice flee in terror. She believes Chloe summoned them, and that Rintaro is in danger. In the mansion, Chloe asks Rintaro if she passed his trial since the deadline is tomorrow. He tells her that he'll decide once the trial period ends, so Chloe intends to do her best. Meanwhile, many zombies roamed outside the mansion's gates. Zombies swarm Clarice, who's helpless on the ground. Suddenly, a female knight appears and slays the monsters. Yesterday, Clarice begged the garrison guard's office to help Rintaro. Unfortunately, though, the man told Clarice that the guards are restricted from entering the forest, as it's always been a den for the undead. He states that since they are not headed to the city, he can't send guards to search for the people who live in this forest. Hearing the argument between the men and Clarice, the captain of the guards shows up. Clarice briefs her on the situation. She believes that the girl living in the mansion is a necromancer. Even after hearing the details, the captain tells her that the guard can't be dispatched based solely on her word. Even though she's aware that it's not uncommon for necromancers to hold a grudge against society, since they are shunned for their powers. Clarice heads out to leave, but the captain tells her that although she can't mobilize the guards, she can accompany her since she is off duty in the morning. The captain, named Andre, helps Clarice up after dispatching the undead. She then tells Clarice to keep an eye out, since zombies lack the presence of the living. Those summoned by necromancers are immune to anti-undead medicine. Clarice still opts to go, and Andre realizes that the person she's trying to protect is that important to her. Clarice embarrassedly says it's not true, Rintaro is just her rival. Andre fights off more undead, but soon the two end up cornered on a cliff. Clarice then uses her quick thinking to create a wall using alchemy. Using a pea shooter, she launches a special exploding pill at the zombies, decimating them. Andre senses something, and tells Clarice to stand back. Lance approaches her, and Andre misunderstands him as the boss of the zombies. Chloe counts the zombies, or actually, necro-golems that she made. She realizes that the explosion must have something to do with their disappearance, as she originally made 20 to 30 of them. Meanwhile, Lance and Andre duke it out. Andre realizes that he's incredibly strong, but she doesn't let Clarice use more explosives since they damage the forest further. No sooner is a tree about to fall on Clarice, that Andre dives to protect her. Lance does the same, stopping the tree from falling before throwing it away. He then gestures to the girls to follow him. Andre and Clarice are guided to Chloe. Andri asks Clarice if this little girl was the necromancer she was referring to. Chloe doesn't like being called a little girl, despite the fact that she is a little girl. Rintaro shows up as well, and Clarice takes a breath of relief. She tells him that the forest is overrun with zombies that Chloe summoned. Rintaro points at the zombies working on his farm, and asks her if those are the ones she's talking about. Clarice is shocked that the zombies are doing field work, but Chloe explains that they're called necrogolems. They are quite gentle. Andri tells them that summoning creatures in residential areas is illegal, but as long as they never leave the forest, it should be all good. She then insists on helping around since she bothered them. Rintaro takes her up on the offer and suggests field work, but retracts his words right after since she's a knight. Andri on the other hand doesn't mind. She agrees to work since she specializes in field work because her mother was a farmer. As Lance hands Andri a hoe, Chloe tells her that he respects her chivalry for choosing to protect Clarice. Andri thanks him in turn for protecting both of them from the tree. Things are going along smoothly, but then Clarice interjects and asks why a necromancer is working as a maid. She begins accusing Chloe of being untrustworthy. At this moment, Rintaro tells her to shut up. Rintaro tells Clarice that it's for him to decide whether Chloe can be trusted or not. Clarice tears up, smacks Rintaro before running away. Chloe scolds Rintaro for being insensitive, which astounds him, since it was Clarice who was cruel to her. The girl runs off to find Clarice. Clarice wonders why she's so upset at all that happened. She ends up wandering deep into the forest. Wolves suddenly appear, but Clarice is out of anti-undead items. She gets pinned against a tree. When Clarice thought she was going to die here, Chloe showed up. The girl begins to play with the wolves. Chloe then guides Clarice away from the forest. During the trip back, Clarice apologizes and talks about Rintaro. She tells Chloe that he was originally just some kid her grandpa had picked, but due to his slightly strange demeanor, people had started spreading bad rumors about him. She then talks about how he seems to have more fun being around Chloe. Chloe bluntly says that perhaps she's feeling jealous. Clarice looks embarrassed. She is about to respond, when Rintaro shows up and guides the two back. On the way, Rintaro apologizes to Clarice for making her feel worried. The two make up and continue on their way. Rintaro talks about preparing lunch, but notices that Chloe looks pale and asks her about it. Chloe panics a bit before saying that it's probably because of how hungry she is. At the mansion, Rintaro fed the girls delicious food, and sent Clarice and Andri home before it got dark. They say goodbye to their new friends and head off. After they've left, Chloe suddenly feels faint and falls against Rintaro. She quickly recovers herself and apologizes for her legs giving out. She then asks Rintaro if he'll hire her now that he's seen how useful she is. Rintaro tells her she failed, which shocks Chloe. With a sad face, the girl shows him her bandaged hands. Rintaro tells Chloe that she must have needed a lot of blood to make the potions to create so many necrogolems. Chloe asks how he's so familiar with this. Rintaro replies that she seemed off, so he did some research over how much blood is needed to make 30 necrogolems. He then asks her if she intended to continue making golems every day if he'd asked her. Chloe says that that was the plan. Rintaro clearly tells her that he won't hire someone so willing to harm themselves. Chloe tries to argue saying that she's ready to put her life on the line, but she faints again. Chloe wakes up on the sofa, and Rintaro brings her some freshly cooked gyoza. Chloe happily eats up the food but starts crying uncontrollably because of the delicious meal. The girl tells Rintaro that she was picked up in the forest and was moved from one institution to another. She was trained as a maid in a mansion but got kicked out when they learned she was a necromancer. Chloe says that someone like her has no place to call home. She says that Rintaro's kindness made her extremely happy. She wanted to be of use to him. Rintaro asks her to get a good night's sleep, they will be able to talk more tomorrow. Chloe thanks him for the food before he leaves. Next morning, Rintaro goes to check up on Chloe, but finds that she's left. He sits down on the table and begins remembering Chloe. He becomes worried after realizing that she's probably wandering the forest of corpses on an empty stomach. He decided to find her and run out of the house. Luckily, he finds Chloe right outside the door to the mansion. Chloe suddenly asks him if he would like to hire her for a week. She hopes they could start over. After teasing Chloe a bit, Rintaro says that he'll let her if she follows his rules. He says that if she wants to stay, she should make sure she gets proper nutrition, take breaks, and keep her body safe from harm. Chloe agrees, and Rintaro tells her that she's hired. He also tells her to consider the mansion her home now. And if she doesn't want him to worry, she should never leave the house so suddenly again. Rintaro asks her to hurry up and come to breakfast. Chloe was unable to hold back her tears. After all these years, she had finally found her home,